My name is Jason Woods, and I'm a professional adaptive motocross rider. Adaptive. What's adaptive? Modifying according to changing circumstances. I guess you could say I've adapted to my circumstances. In high school, middle school, I grew up without a father. Got into some drugs and some alcohol and fast cars, and got to hanging out with the wrong crowd, and took some bad turns in my life. Had a high school pregnancy, which now I have two beautiful boys that I love dearly. Just got involved with the wrong crowd. I got saved whenever I was young, and I always knew what I was doing was wrong. All the drugs and the alcohol and stuff like that, I knew it was wrong, but I didn't start really living for the Lord until I was around 28 years of age. And He has really blessed me with a beautiful wife and three wonderful, wonderful children. I was actually leaving for a what they call a Loretta Lynn qualifier. I had all my stuff packed up and ready to go that morning, and I woke up, had a slight cold, and I thought, oh gosh, all this training and everything that I've done to get to this point, I'm going to go to the doctor right now so I can get this sickness knocked out of me and go on to the race. About 20 minutes later, I was at the doctor's office, and he looked at me kind of funny, and he said, I think we ought to do some blood work for you. And I was like, well, okay. And I thought that was kind of weird, but I could see it in his eyes that something wasn't right. It was about a 10-minute walk from his office building to the hospital. And in that 10 minutes, whenever I reached the hospital, I could no longer walk. They had to put me in a wheelchair. About 10 minutes later, I couldn't even sit up in a wheelchair. I actually had to lay down in the carpet. And they ended up putting me in the emergency room. And at that point, I don't remember anything for 2 weeks.
For the years before we got married, about 4 years before we got married, we would be in the hospital every other weekend because he would wreck on his dirt bikes. So I just kind of got immune to being in the hospitals. I didn't have a lot of fear a lot of times in that area. It was just kind of weird because I just knew the doctors would fix him up and we would go back on the dirt bike track. It's just something we did every weekend. But then that day was just, it was a little different because I could see where Jason had no energy. He was just getting real lethargic. They did ask us to spend the night, to stay over. It was probably about 2 o'clock in the morning, and they were telling me that he was not getting any better, and they were gonna have to airlift us to Asheville.
Whenever I woke up, my wife was standing in front of me, and she actually had a belly on her, and I didn't realize that I'd been out for that long. In a 2 weeks period, a girl that's pregnant, I guess they can, their belly can get quite large in 2 weeks. So that was the first surreal moment I had. Like, oh my gosh, something's bad has happened. And as I looked down at my body, I could see all the tubes and the wires connected to me, and my hands were kind of wrapped up, and I just didn't know really what was going on at that moment in time.
They kind of told us it wasn't that bad, but when we got to the hospital, the chaplain met us as soon as we walked in, and he said, it's not looking good. They've brought Jason in, they're trying to stabilize him. And it did hit me then, but the first thing I knew to do, Janice and I, which is his mom, went straight to a little room and just got on our knees and started praying. I mean, that's the only security I had, was to go and just say, Lord, all of this is in your hands. And at the moment in time, I was 4 months pregnant with our first child, and all these emotions could come in my head, but I just didn't think of anything at the time. As we were there in that little room praying, we actually saw people run into the ICU, and code blue was going off in the hallways, and it was for Jason. He had flatlined, had a heart attack, and that's when the sepsis, the blood poisoning, just had gotten all through his body.
I had what they called sepsis and DIC. It's a very rare blood disorder. There's very few people in the U.S. that actually has survived this. They lose legs, arms, limbs of whatever. Whenever I was told that they were going to have to amputate my fingers and my toes, at that point, I really didn't care because I knew I was in the Lord's hands and He had a greater plan for me. While I was in the hospital, I actually learned that I'd flatlined once for 20 seconds and I'd had 2 heart attacks.